Well, hello, everybody from the Leadership Institute of Innovate Bio. I'm Russ Reed, and I'm the co-PI for Goal 3. And one of our activities within Goal 3 is the Leadership Institute. And I'm very happy today to have Michael Kelly with us. Michael is the CFO and the Chief Operating Officer of Piedmont Animal Health. Welcome, Michael.
Welcome, Russ. Good to be here.
It's good to see you. Yeah, it's good to see you, Michael. We go back a long ways, Michael, and I just want to, right off the top, thank you for doing this for us. And I want to thank you for your past contributions to our Fellows Program. I think you may have given 6 lectures over 6 years, and I'm very grateful. And I'm very grateful for that, and so is the National Science Foundation. Michael, this grant is called Innovate Bio. It's based out of Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. And this is the National Center for Biotechnology Education. And with me today is the grant manager, Purnima Rao. Hi, Purnima.
Hello, Russ.
Hello,
hi,
Purnima.
Michael. It's really good to be here today.
Good to see you, Purnima.
Thank you.
Michael and Purnima as well. We have Sean Killebrew, who's our media tech from Foresight Tech, who's on this interview as well, and we'll make sure that everything looks good when it's finally published. So welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Russ. Glad to be here again.
My first question for you today, Michael, is can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Piedmont and your role as CFO and COO?
Yes, Russ. So I've spent my entire business career in the life science industry, most of it with chemical companies who have spent a lot of money on speculative R&D. I began my career as a salesman out of college, and then after I graduated from Harvard Business School, I took a position with Ciba-Geigy in Basel, Switzerland. Ciba-Geigy was one of the chemical companies in Switzerland at the time. I eventually was promoted to a job in the U.S. And at the time of the merger of Ciba-Geigy and Sandoz to form Novartis, I ended up in the Novartis Animal Health division here in North America, ultimately ended up as Chief Financial Officer of that division, and then moved on to Piedmont Animal Health, where I have served as CFO and COO for most of the last 12 years. Now, Piedmont itself was founded 20 years ago by Roland Johnson, a serial entrepreneur and an individual who has had a really significant impact on the companion animal business here in the United States. And if you couple Roland with Dr. Doug Hepler, our Chief Scientific Officer, who has 23 FDA companion animal approvals to his name, we're talking about a very dynamic environment. In terms of my role, I am intimately involved in selling our technology, portfolio management, as well as brainstorming innovations. And of course, I handle all of the financial functions of the organization.
Michael, thank you for that answer, and very interesting career pathway. So very enlightening for our folks that'll be taking this Leadership Institute. And one of the things we're really trying to do in this Leadership Institute is make sure that the people who are mainly going to be community college instructors and high school teachers have an opportunity to see what it looks like from the other side. So thank you for that answer. I'm going to turn it over to Purnima to ask the next questions.
Thank you so much, Russ. Michael, it's a pleasure to interview you today. And Piedmont is known to bring successful pharmaceutical products in animal health. And I see that you are presenting on animal health pharmaceutical business model today. Can you please let us know what you're presenting on?
Yes, Purnima. So I'm going to be introducing our audience to the animal health industry. We'll discuss significant therapeutic categories in terms of the companion animal side of the business, review drug development activities, and discuss the importance of portfolio management.
That's definitely fascinating. Having been in life science industry myself, this would make a wonderful presentation. I can't wait. But I do want to ask you that through your various roles you have had in Ciba-Geigy and Novartis and Piedmont, what traits as a CFO and COO do you like to see in the future upcoming leaders?
Actually, as I think about that question, my most significant area that I think you could see improvement in senior level executives is that many of them end up being very siloed, functionally deep experts, but they don't necessarily have a breadth of experience across other functions, which are so important as you're thinking about decision making for an organization. So for an example, as I mentioned earlier, I started out in field sales. I was actually selling feed animal health products to dairy farmers in New York State. And from that actual basis, I moved on to strategic planning, new ventures, stint in marketing before I got into the financial function. But throughout my career, I have relied upon those broad functional skills that I've learned in order to make broad-based decisions. And oftentimes, as I mentioned, I think that our senior executives in companies need a broader base of functional diversity.
Thank you so much. I truly feel that learning about broad functional skills and reflecting on that, definitely would love to learn more. Thank you so much, Michael.
You're most welcome, Purnima.
Russ, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Purnima. Michael, thank you. Michael, any thoughts before we head into your presentation? Any final thoughts?
Yes, Russ, I have a couple of thoughts. I am going to today point out some differences throughout the presentation between the animal health pharmaceutical industry and the human pharmaceutical industry. But there are a couple of differences that I want to note right up front. Our viewing audience here today has experience with purchasing prescription drugs. You understand how it works. You go to your MD if you're sick. The MD diagnoses a condition, writes a prescription. If there is a drug that can solve the issue, you go to the pharmacy and you pick up your prescription. Well, the work that those various players take on in terms of the MD and the pharmacist are all collapsed into one in veterinary medicine. The vet is the MD, the vet is the pharmacist. Now, the other thing that you're well aware of is when you pay for the drug at the drugstore, you are not paying but a small fraction of the cost of that drug if you have insurance. There's third-party payers that are paying the bulk of the cost of that prescription. In the case of the animal health industry, the pet owner is paying the bulk, in fact, is paying all of the drug cost. Now, there is some insurance products in the animal health industry. For example, actually over many years now, the equine industry is probably the most significant example of insurance. Horses can be very valuable, so they are insured, and there's usually a major medical component to that insurance. My wife and I own horses as well as dogs and cats, and we have one of our horses insured. And there are a number of companies today that are offering pet health insurance for dogs and cats, but as a total percentage of the population of dogs and cats in this country is a very small amount of those animals are actually covered by insurance. So those are just a couple of overall thoughts that I thought would be interesting for our listening audience.
Excellent, Michael. Well, Michael, I understand you're going to share a presentation with us now.
Yes, I am.
And while you're searching for that, we know that this is the first part of the presentation, and then you'll get back together with the group in June and give them a case to solve, correct?
That is correct, Russ. So let me introduce you to the to the global and U.S. animal health business. There's a real break in this pharmaceutical industry in that you have farm animals and you have companion animals. The farm animal business is cattle, swine, poultry, sheep, and increasingly aquaculture. And I might note that we hit a historical milestone in this past decade where the amount of farm-raised fish exceeded wild-caught fish, and that is a trend that will continue. On the companion animal side, it's primarily dogs, cats, and horses. There are about 180 million dogs and cats in the United States and 3 million horses. There are also exotic companion animals, or what we call the exotics: fish, rodents, reptiles, etc. But the big business are these three species. Now you can also take a look at the global business in terms of a country's development. So developed countries like the U.S., the companion animal business is larger than the farm animal business, and it's growing very rapidly. On the other hand, the farm animal business is growing slowly, generally about population growth rates. In the case of developing countries, farm animal business dominates, and it really is just dependent upon the growth rates of the country as far as that goes. So fast-growing developing countries, the farm animal business is growing quickly, and likewise a slow-growing company, it's growing slowly. And the companion animal businesses likewise are small in those countries. Now, if we step back 18 years to 1999, the global animal health pharma sales were about $12 billion, and as you can see on this pie chart, the farm animal pharma business was significantly larger than companion animal and comprised about 80% of the business. If we then take a look at 2017, you can see the massive increase in the pharma sales in this industry to $30 billion, and specifically you see where there's been massive growth on the companion animal side. In 2017, about 45% of the global animal health pharma sales were companion animal farm animal sales, just slightly more than that. And if you look at the compound annual growth rates, the companion animal category has had growth rates of 9% on an annual basis from 1999 to 2015, way outpacing inflation, whereas the farm animal compound growth rates of 2% are pretty similar to the inflation rate that we've seen over that time frame. Now, if we then take a snapshot of the U.S. animal health pharmaceutical sales in this breakout, companion animal and equine sales in the United States in 2017 represented 60% of the marketplace here, and then farm animals 40%, and continues to decline as a percentage of the total business. And what's driving this significant growth of the various therapeutic categories for companion animal business are new products that are invented and receive approval and then ultimately commercialized in the marketplace. So take, for example, the allergy category. In 2015, there was a specific product labeled for allergy in dogs. There was a lot of steroids that were used, and there were also human-labeled products that were being used in order to control allergies in dogs, which were a significant issue. In 2016, there was an innovative product that was launched, had good efficacy, labeled for dogs, but also was very inexpensive. And the U.S. marketplace for allergy medications just exploded. So this just shows you the dynamic marketplace that we see with the companion animal business in the United States and elsewhere globally. And here you have the major therapeutic areas of the companion animal pharmaceutical business. The very largest category is parasitology. We have the external parasites or ectoparasiticides, and those would be targeting fleas and ticks. And then we have the endoparasites, the internal ones. The large one is heartworm, but there are also a series of other worms, hookworms, roundworms, tapeworms, whipworms, a lot of worms that are problems for dogs as well as cats. So that's the largest category, and in the human side, by contrast, the parasitology pharmaceutical business is very small. There are much, much larger categories. In fact, almost everything's got a larger category on the human side. Biologicals, second largest category are vaccines. Then that's followed by the allergy category, which we just talked about with explosive growth. Antimicrobials, primarily antibiotics, follow allergy, and then the pain category, which also is one of these categories, if you go back to the mid-90s, was a very small category. Off-label human products were used. Then a product was introduced to the market for chronic as well as acute pain for dogs, and that market just exploded. And then finally, we have the other category. These are all the other therapeutics, endocrinology, cardiology, oncology, etc. Now, this is just a comparison of the top global animal health pharmaceutical companies, rear view mirror back to 2003 and then 2020. And I will note that over this time frame, there's been massive consolidation in the industry. If you take a look at the top 4 companies in 2020, they acquired about 6 of those top 11 companies since 2003 and now represent about 70% of the global animal health sales. That's a concentration that's far more significant than human pharmaceutical business. The other thing I want to point out is the association, or let's put it this way, companies that had human pharmaceutical divisions also had or developed animal health divisions in order to commercialize therapy that may have been common to the two businesses. And that really takes us back to the 40s, 50s, 60s when antibiotics were discovered and were developed. The human pharmaceutical companies realized that there was an opportunity to control disease in farm animals, and so they created animal health divisions. Now let's take a look at the activities around animal health drug development. You first start with a product concept and invention. That invention could be a new chemical entity that has a unique attribute about it, can control or a disease per se. It might be a highly innovative new formulation. It could be a combination of drug substances that also adds value. So as an example, on the human side, you most commonly run into combinations when you take a walk down your cough and cold section of a drugstore. The cough and cold medications may have a series of drugs, ones that control fever, cough suppressants, symptoms related to a cold, antihistamines, decongestants, etc. And in the animal health business, we have a series of products, in parasitology in particular, where you've got combination products. So once you come up with the invention, you then have to source the active pharmaceutical ingredient or the drug substance. This is what makes the product perform. And you source, you have to find a manufacturer, you then have to upscale the active ingredient in order to be producing enough quantities in order to move forward with your development program. You then move into the development of prototype formulations that you will then put into the target species for proof of concept safety as well as efficacy studies. And I will note this is a significant difference from the human pharma model. On the human side, they'll start off in rodents and move to maybe rabbits or then to dogs, primates, before they get into small-scale human trials. And that makes sense. But in the case of companion animal development, we can move to the target species immediately. Now, with a new chemical compound, new chemical entity, once you've established efficacy and safety, you move to dosing studies. You want to optimize the chemistry in terms of the efficacy it delivers and making sure that it is safe for the animal that will be used in. Now, all along this process, you are working on analytical method development. Assays for the drug substance, related substances. There's a series of analytical methods that you develop in order to prove that you have a stable formulation. And ultimately, you will manufacture the final dosage form of the product that you want to put into your final animal studies. When you are developing that final dosage form or formulation, you are really concerned that you have stability. And what is a bit unique for the animal side is, in particularly oral dog formulations, there are significant amount of flavored formulations in the marketplace in order to make it easier for the pet owner to administer the medication to their dog. So you move then from that final manufactured product into the clinical safety and efficacy studies. Those can take months, they can take years. When you're finished with those studies, then there's statistical analysis that is applied to all of the data. And you follow that by submitting this large set of packages to the FDA, and hopefully then you end up with a final approval. So those are the activities, the large activities in terms of animal health drug development. There are a myriad of very small detailed things that you do also. Now, if we take a look at both timelines and cost for companion animal drug development, from concept to FDA approval generally will take from 6 to 13 years for proprietary or innovative products. In the case of generics, the timeline ranges from 5 to 8 years. And I will note the difference between generics and the proprietary products is you don't have to do all of the clinical work that you had to originally do in order to get a new innovative proprietary product approved. You might do some clinical work like bioequivalence in order to prove that it is in fact equivalent to the pioneer, but that still is a relatively small undertaking relative to the clinical work done on a proprietary product. Now, in terms of cost, the full cost for developing an innovative product, including labor, runs from $8 million to $30 million. In the case of generics, that cost is $6 to $12 million. Now, this does exclude the cost of products that are failures in development and ultimately not approved. As you can imagine, intellectual property is very important for proprietary products. It takes a long time to get them developed. And as a result, patent law allows a company to recoup the massive investment that they have made in an animal drug. I might note I had an interesting conversation over the holidays with a series of 20-year-olds who were very, very upset about U.S. intellectual property laws. And so I asked them questions about what it was that concerned them, and come to find out they didn't really know a lot about our patent laws. So I explained the importance of patent laws, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry. In the end of the conversation, they realized, wow, patent laws really are important in order to drive innovation that is a benefit for citizens of the world. And the last thing, and this is also something quite different from the human business, on the human side, when a product goes off patent, within 12 months, there's about a 50% reduction in the pioneer product, or the generic business, at that point, takes half of the business. Over on the animal health side, generics account for a small percentage of sales in most of the therapeutic categories, and that's due to the cost, time frame necessary to develop and get approvals, and then finally, the commercial potential of an animal health generic in those categories are much smaller than the human categories. As a result, portfolio management is a critical priority for a drug company, and due to resource limitations in both dollars and time, not all projects can be immediately funded or developed. There are certain numbers of projects that are normally fast-tracked, and those projects have priorities, and there's another group of projects, typically in a portfolio for any company, that are moved along at a speed slower than fast-tracked, but they continue to progress them. Now, many of the projects, including fast-track projects, after they're approved for development, run into issues. There can be technical issues, clinical issues, regulatory issues, and ultimately there can be commercial challenges. That slows down the process of development, particularly when you hit those technical or clinical hurdles, and then sometimes projects are abandoned altogether. Now let's discuss Piedmont Animal Health. We are very unusual in that we are really a pure play companion animal drug development company. We invent, develop, ultimately submit the dossiers to the FDA in order to receive approval of our drugs for the U.S. marketplace. We have 20 people in R&D, and they cover the major functional areas of R&D. And historically, our go-to-market strategy is to sell developed assets to the major players in the industry, somewhere during the development of those products. Now, it's unusual to be strictly a drug development company, but what makes us also unusual is that we have a very sizable portfolio of innovative products currently in development. We also have a modest portfolio of products that are generics, as well as products that we have in development for third parties. And then we have historically a 65% success rate in getting regulatory approval for products that we've put into development. Now, Piedmont is probably the most productive as well as efficient FDA companion animal R&D development company in the United States. And this chart has three metrics. The very left metric actually shows the total companion animal R&D expenditures over the time frame of 2013 to mid-2020. And the letters designate the top 7 companies in the industry other than Piedmont Animal Health. The middle chart shows over that same time frame the number of companion animal FDA approvals in the U.S., and as you can see, Piedmont Animal Health leads the industry in total approvals. And by the way, I'll note that these are not label extensions or additional species. These are just considered new FDA approvals. And then the chart on the far right side is measuring the efficiency of the dollars that are invested in R&D and the approvals that have come from that investment. And like your golf score, lower is better. And as you can see, we have the most efficient development spend of any company, at an average cost of about $12 million for those 7 approvals over the 7.5-year period that we've measured here. And this chart here shows the innovative drug portfolio of Piedmont. You can see we're very concentrated in 3 categories: antimicrobials, the pain category, as well as the other therapeutic category. We're going to now discuss the U.S. companion animal pain market. As I mentioned it to you earlier, back in the early 90s, this was a very, very small market, and it has grown substantially since then. The pain market can be broken into 2 segments. We have the acute pain market, and we have the chronic pain market. The acute pain market is for post-operative pain, other acute pain situations that an animal might encounter. It's smaller than the chronic pain market, which is by and large osteoarthritis for dogs. As you'll see down below, dogs represent almost 90% of the U.S. pain market in terms of the dollars spent for dogs, and you'll see in a couple of slides why that's so. So there are a series of drugs that are currently marketed today for pain in dogs. There are other therapies in development. The majority of pain drugs that have been labeled for controlling pain, inflammation in dogs are what we call non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or NSAIDs. And there are NSAIDs that are used in human medicine also. Many of these drugs are very good for both chronic as well as acute pain in dogs. They are oral products, so relatively easy to administer to dogs. There's daily dosing with all these products. For acute pain, the dosing regimen is for a few days. In the case of osteoarthritis or chronic pain, the dosing will continue for the life of the animal. There are adverse events with all products, so you have to treat them carefully. And I will note, if you look at the European Union, they have approved another chemistry. It's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug also. But this one's unusual in that you can monthly dose your dog for chronic pain. There are adverse events with this drug in Europe, as there are with all the NSAIDs, but we have not seen a U.S. approval, although the product has been marketed in Europe for a number of years now. If we look under the horizon in terms of what is in development, monoclonal antibody therapy is currently being developed for chronic pain, and the administration, as best we can tell currently, since there's nothing commercialized, is that there will be injections on a monthly basis to help manage chronic pain in dogs. I might also note that opioids, off-label opioids, are also used for acute pain. Now, moving on to pain drugs that are marketed or being developed for cats, there are actually only 2 NSAIDs that are labeled for cats to be administered in the U.S. Robenacoxib, which is an oral product, or an injectable, but you can't dose your cat for more than 3 days with that product, and meloxicam, which is an injectable, and there's only 1 treatment allowed. So these are strictly acute pain products, and as you can see, there's not a lot available, and there's nothing available for chronic pain in cats. So when I mentioned dogs dominate the pain category, yes, they're always going to be larger than cats, but we have not come up with a solution for chronic pain in cats, which would be a significant segment in its own right, once we find the right solution. Now, like in dogs, monoclonal antibody therapy is being developed for managing chronic pain in cats, And again, that would be a monthly injection, or at least that's what we expect currently. So that concludes today's presentation. I've introduced you to the animal health pharmaceutical industry. You have seen the significant therapeutic categories within the companion animal business. We've discussed the importance of portfolio management. And thank you very much for your time.
Michael, that was a wonderful presentation, a great overview, and I think our Leadership Institute participants are going to be very excited by this. And judging by your statistics and the change in the companion animal market, I'm pretty sure that out of the 25 that we'll have, and I've seen you do this before in another program, you will certainly ascertain how many of those actually have a companion animal. And so I think it'll be, more than just their brains that are working, because everybody loves their pets.
Interestingly enough, thank you very much, by the way, for those comments, Ross. And, when poor Nima asked me, gee, what would you like other senior executives to do? I thought to myself, well, gee, I'd love to see them all have more companion animals.
Exactly. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank poor Nima for stepping in today and help do this interview. And I want to thank Sean for recording it. And of course, Michael, the next step is, after they've seen this, there's the case. And I'm very excited about that. And I know that you shared me kind of like maybe where that case is going to take them, but it's very exciting. And thank you very much today for this interview.
You're most welcome, and I'm very, very much looking forward to this next step in the Leadership Institute program.